Hi, welcome to the Woodshop Nerdery. I'm Tom, and this is my Shopsmith Mark 7. And I can't believe it, but it's already been a little over a year since I brought this machine into the garage. So that means I can do a 1-year review for you. But guess what? Just as I was thinking about making this video, Shopsmith released their new catalog on their website. And on the cover of that new catalog, the PowerPro 2.0. This is the 1.0 version. And I'll discuss a little later in the video, after the 1-year review, whether or not I'm going to upgrade. This is actually the 4th Mark 7 review video I've done. The first one was an unboxing. The second was an update on the unboxing and the resolution of some quality issues that I had asked Shopsmith to resolve. The third was a 90-day review. And I encourage you to go look at those other 3 videos, particularly the 90-day review, because everything I said about the quality and function in the 90-day review is still true today 1 year later. Since recording the 90-day review video, I've only noticed 2 minor issues that are super minor and really not a problem. The first is that the overlay here doesn't quite fit right here in the plastic housing. That creates kind of a bubble right here, which hasn't been a problem. It's just sort of a cosmetic thing, I guess. The controls on this panel have never failed to operate. They've worked 100% of the time, every time. So I don't consider that really an issue. The second minor issue is in relation to this overhead guard / dust collector, and it's this screw right here. This is a replacement screw. It's an Allen key cap head screw that matches the 5/32 inch size, so I can use the same tool to tighten it down. The reason I replaced it, because the one that came on here was a T-nut style, and the plastic handle just popped off the end and it would no longer tighten. I do think that component should have been more durable, but it's such a minor issue, I really can't be concerned about it. Other than those 2 tiny things, the Shopsmith Mark 7 has been perfect. And hey, listen, this isn't garage furniture. I'm using this machine all the time for all sorts of tasks. I have gotten quite a few questions about my Mark 7, and they're mostly in relation to the differences between the Mark 7 and Mark 5. One of those things is the double tilt base. The original Mark V subframe would only tilt to the right, but the Mark 7 can tilt to the right or the left. That gives the ability to do under table operations with the headstock. Here's the Mark 7 set up in under table mode using that double tilt system. In this case, I've got the drum sander installed, and the setup like this is really helpful for me to sand the inside curves of workpieces like this. I could take this drum sander out and I could put a router bit in its place, and I could use it as an under table router. Now, both of the routing and sanding functions I'm talking about here in under table mode can be done in over table mode if I tilt the system the other way, just like the old Mark 5s. But when I add the dust collection system like this above the sander, it's really nice to get all that dust sucked up from above. With the old Mark 5 systems, you could use this style of table insert where if the drum sander is coming from above, the dust is getting sucked out from below. The one weakness I have found in this piece is when you're doing any sort of overhead routing or sanding, if the workpiece starts to cover that hole during your operation, it really impedes that dust collection. Whereas with the overhead system, there's this nice big 4-inch opening here. There's no way your workpiece is going to cover that entire opening. With a smaller drum sander or a router bit, I can use the fence. In this case, I can either do edge sanding guided by the fence, and I also have the same advantage of the overhead dust collection system. And I've really been enjoying this under table system for the routing and sanding. And I just recently discovered a new reason I like this double tilt system. Let me change over and show you that. Here's an arrangement I just thought of recently because I needed to repair the backs of some chisels in order to get them sharp for my current project. I was using the belt sander, but I think the fact that the belt sander is basically a loose belt running over platen, it was making the backs curved side to side and in the long direction. But with the disc sander, the abrasive is firmly attached to the metal plate with an adhesive. And yes, this may not be perfectly flat, such as a machined surface, but it would help me grind the backs of these chisels down to a point that was close enough I could then finish the work on my water stones without killing myself. Now, Work Sharp makes sort of a system like this with a horizontal abrasive disc, and so does Veritas, and possibly some others. But the Work Sharp system is a 6-inch disc, so it has a 3-inch diameter. That would not cover the entire length of even this fairly short Irwin chisel. So in order to fit the entire back onto the abrasive, I would have to angle it. And if you understand how these abrasives work, per rotation you're getting more linear footage of abrasive on the outside than you are on the inside, so that makes the cutting skewed, and you won't really get a flat back. But with this 6-inch diameter, I can aim the tip of that chisel right towards the middle, and yes, it'll take more off down here than it does down here, but it'll be flat, even if I change the slope in this direction by a little bit. I was able to get this one mostly flat and then finish flattening it on my water stones and honing, and of course polishing with a strop. The level of polish you see here was not my intention, it's just happened that way because it's a super flat back, and I've done repeating honings on my strop as I work, so it just gets more and more polished. Same with the bevel. This is an old chisel that I bought off of eBay probably 20 years ago, and it's been hanging around the drawer, and it was severely out of flat. I mean, it was bumps and humps and twists all over. And it's a pretty long chisel, and I want to keep it long because that's going to be a great paring chisel. And again, this full 6-inch diameter allowed me to get this flat on the surface here and draw that flat out, again finishing up on my water stones. And in the same batch years ago that I bought this one off of eBay, I bought these two. These are firmer chisels. This one's a Buck Brothers and this one is a Witherby. Definitely don't want to throw those out, but I'll need to get those backs flat. Now, I brought this topic up to Scott Markwood in our last video discussion. It didn't make the cut in the current video, but maybe at some point in the future he'll release an off-topic video from that discussion. And he mentioned that I could do the same thing with a traditional Mark V, tilt it the other way and mount the sanding disc on the rear spindle. And that's true. The one thing I like about having it on this side is I get to mount the guard and the dust collection. So this will contain some of that metal dust that gets generated by this abrasive. Not that big a deal, just a little nice to have. One of the physical characteristics that are different about the headstock on the Mark 7 compared to the Mark 5 is its weight. It is a bit heavier than the old mechanical headstock. Some people have asked if I plan on getting the lift assist attachment. So some people find that they need a lift assist to get it up in this direction. I don't need that right now, and I'm not going to get one because it installs down here and it would force me to push my table system that way. And for some operations, I like to stand to the side of the table. Here's an example. Let's say I wanted to rip a bevel on the side of this piece of work. I would set it up just like this with the riving knife installed and not the saw guard, because in this situation, I like to use a hand-over-hand gripper method. The gripper goes against the fence, down toward the table, and is supported by the leg. Both of them. And in my personal opinion, because I'm using the gripper, I'm mitigating some of the additional hazard I added by taking off the saw guard, plus I'm going to get a much higher quality cut. And I just move it like this. If I had the lift assist, instead of standing here comfortably with my arms at a comfortable position, I would have to lean over more to do this operation. So that's why I'm not so interested in the lift assist at this moment. This motor can also run in reverse. Looking into the quill shaft, it normally runs counterclockwise. That's true of the Mark V old mechanical headstock as well. This headstock will also run clockwise looking into the shaft. The As far as the forward and reverse function, I have used that with the thickness planer. Normally, the thickness planer on a Mark V would mount to the left of the headstock, so you'd be standing on the other side of the Mark V and reaching around the headstock to control the speed. In the case of the Mark VII, you slide the headstock over and mount the thickness planer on the right-hand side of the headstock and feed in this direction, which means you're looking at the controls when feeding stock through the system. In order to do that, it has to run in reverse. And that was a big help one time because I got an overheating error and I was able to see it, shut down the machine, let it cool off and start again. And I thought that was a lot better than it just stopping in the middle of cutting the wood, which might have damaged the workpiece or my thickness planer. And another question has to do with the range of speed. The mechanical Mark V has a bottom RPM of 700 and a top speed rating of around 5,000 RPM. I do often run this headstock lower than 700 RPM. It's very convenient to have. Either drum sanding, disc sanding, belt sanding. Sometimes for some materials it's nice to be able to go a little slower. On the high end, when I'm doing routing, I usually will route somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 RPM depending on the bit. I know that defies conventional wisdom. The conventional wisdom is to run it at 10,000 RPM, which is the max this headstock will do. But for the joinery type routing I do, it seems that that 6,000 to 8,000 range, depending on the bit, is pretty much ideal, and it just seems to be the range that this device operates the best. So that kind of brings us to the final question, which is it worth the price? My answer is that depends. For me, it was worth the price. I have no regrets, and I'm glad I bought it. It was expensive, and you know, my brother was making fun of me. He said, "You spent that much on a table saw? I can't believe it." And I said, "Well, brother, let me ask you this. How many fishing boats do you have?" And he said, "Well, I have 3. I said, "How much did you pay for the cheapest one of those fishing boats, including the first year setup and maintenance?" Well, he wouldn't answer. He just looked at me and said, "I see your point." So, I'm not a fisherman. I'm not a hunter. We don't go on expensive vacations. We don't buy fancy cars. This is my hobby. I'm in the garage 5 to 7 times a week. It might be only for an hour. It might only be for 30 minutes, but I'm out here quite a bit. And the only exception to that is when we're out of town on vacation. And I expect to keep up that pace for several years, at least a decade or more. And especially if I make it to retirement age, I'm definitely going to be using this thing a lot. But I will tell you, it took me a long time, actually several years, to finally decide to upgrade to the Mark VII. Prior to this, I had the Shopsmith Mark V Model 510. And the reason it took me such a long time to make the decision is that the Shopsmith Mark V Model 510 is a killer system. It's excellent. The truth is, there isn't really anything that I can do on this machine that I wasn't able to do on my Shopsmith Mark V. So if the financial picture was a little different and money was a little tighter, I wouldn't have bought this machine. I would have stuck with my Mark V 510. But like I said, since I did have the ability to purchase this machine, I'm really enjoying all the extra features that this has to offer. So that's my 1-year review of the Shopsmith Mark VII. Now let's talk about the Shopsmith PowerPro 2.0. Admittedly, I don't know much about this system. I happen to be on the Shopsmith website and happened to notice the release of the new catalog, which featured the PowerPro 2.0 on the cover. And all I really know about it is what I read in the catalog. In the traditional Shopsmith pattern, I can either purchase the upgrade for my current PowerPro, or I can buy a whole new headstock outright, or I can do the do-it-yourself PowerPro upgrade, which is going to include that 2.0 system. Based on the catalog, the upgrade from the PowerPro 1 to the PowerPro 2 looks like it includes a new touchscreen computer interface, some wiring and switches, and some decals. It also looks like it includes a new quill feed shaft. My best guess is that they had to change the geometry of that shaft slightly to accommodate the room needed to house the new electronics. And the price is $419. That is expensive, but not out of the realm of possibility. I think I do want to keep my Shopsmith Mark VII up to date with the latest features. After all, when you turn on the Shopsmith PowerPro 1.0, the boot screen says that the software version is dated 2011. That's been a minute, right? I know that lots of people will agree with me. on keeping the Shopsmith up to date. If you look at the user forums, there's many people who started with a Shopsmith Mark 5, then upgraded to the 510 table system, then upgraded the 510 table system to the ProFence system, and then upgraded the ProFence system to the rails with the magnetic ruler. And then when the Mark 7 came out, they added the double tilt, or maybe they upgraded to the PowerPro headstock. They just incrementally made the changes over time. So the expenses are accrued incrementally over time rather than a big bang expense of buying a new machine. Besides keeping things up to date, there's two features that I like in the list here. One, it seems that we'll be able to upgrade the software on this new device over time. So if there's new features or bug fixes, we'll be able to get that firmware upgraded. The other nice thing they have listed here is this built-in diagnostics. So if there's any problem with the digital motor or the computer, it sounds like there's going to be an onboard diagnostic system that will suggest some fixes or troubleshooting steps. That'd be really nice. But I'm undecided if I'm going to upgrade. The thing that has me concerned is the touch screen. Have you heard of zombie fingers? Well, I've got zombie fingers. For my iPhone touchscreen, I have no problem. It works perfectly every time. But the touchscreens in our vehicles, on the Subaru, it's about 50-50 I can get it to work. And in our Honda van, I can only get that thing to work 10% of the time. And you're just sitting there tapping and tapping and tapping, and nothing's happening. And that's really frustrating when you're trying to drive the car. One of the reasons for that is dry skin. Most of these touchscreens these days are going to be the capacitive style touchscreens, and they require moisture in the skin to transfer the electronic signal from your body to the screen. Well, as a woodworker with sawdust everywhere and touching sandpaper and tools all the time, my fingers are dry. And I think that's part of the reason I have such a hard time with touchscreens. And quite frankly, I'm afraid of putting that touchscreen in and having a bunch of frustration with my zombie fingers. I have looked to see if I could get more information about this 2.0 touchscreen, but there isn't a lot of information on the Shopsmith website. In fact, if I go to the Shopsmith Mark 7 or PowerPro product page, the Shopsmith PowerPro 1.0 version of the product is still featured. I also tried looking at the Striatech and Technic-Tool websites. Striatech makes the motor and controller box that goes into the Shopsmith PowerPro, and very similar motors go into the Nova lathes made by Technic-Tool. In fact, if you look at the controller for Nova's Saturn lathe, it looks very similar to the PowerPro controller. And Technic-Tool is featuring a new lathe in beta testing called the Neptune, which they're advertising for release in August of 2023. But when I look at that controller, it's not a touchscreen. It's the more traditional hard controls. So Nova's latest product isn't including a touchscreen. I'm not sure what to think about that. I guess it's good that Shopsmith is out in the lead on this one. And on the Striatech website, there was no information about the touchscreen controls. I think it's likely that Striatech is the developer of this new touchscreen control, but it's also possible that Shopsmith developed this new system in-house or contracted directly with the designer and developer of the system. I don't know for sure, but in any case, the Striatech website documents a use case for the Shopsmith PowerPro, which is still currently referencing the 1.0 version. So at this point, I think I'd have to see it in person and test it out to make sure I can be comfortable with the way that touchscreen works. If you have any more information about the PowerPro 2.0, please leave it in the comments below. I'm sure that other viewers would love to learn any information you have about it. And if you think I've missed anything in this one-year Mark 7 review, please also leave a comment. I know that the rest of the community would love to hear your perspective. Well, that does it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.